They say friends are the family we choose. But what happens when life teaches you that sometimes no one is truly your friend? Not because people are cruel or heartless, but because life is your biggest teacher, and it teaches you that relying too much on others can be your biggest weakness. I've learned that the journey to discovering your strength often begins the moment you feel most alone. We live in a world where words are easy, but loyalty is rare. You will meet people who clap for you when you succeed, but quietly disappear when you fall. And it's in those silent falls, those lonely nights, those unanswered messages and broken trusts that you meet the real friend, yourself. This speech is not about bitterness, it's about awakening. It's about realizing that self-dependence, inner strength, and emotional independence are not just powerful, they are essential. Because when you stop expecting others to carry your load, you learn how to walk stronger, stand taller, and rise higher even if you have to do it alone. They say life is a journey, but no one tells you that most of this journey you will walk alone. Not because you choose loneliness, but because life will gradually peel away the illusion of companionship, one layer at a time. When you are laughing, when you are winning, when you are glowing with success, the world seems to orbit around you. You hear words like always here for you, best friends forever, and you begin to believe that the people surrounding you are your anchors. But the moment you stumble, the moment your glow dims, the moment life puts you through trials, those words vanish like smoke in the wind. Silence becomes your only response, and solitude becomes your only witness. It is a hard truth, and it doesn't come easy. There are moments when you want to scream, "Where is everyone I once believed in?" You scroll through your contacts, and suddenly the list feels empty. You replay the promises made to you in your head, promises of loyalty, of support, of standing by your side. And you realize that those promises were only valid when your life was convenient for them. You weren't truly loved, you were simply useful. You weren't valued for who you are, you were appreciated for what you offered. That realization doesn't break you. It shatters something inside you, but in that shattering, something else begins to take shape. You start seeing things more clearly. You recognize how often you lowered your voice so others could speak louder. How often you bent backwards to lift others up, while no one even noticed your back was breaking. How often you showed up for everyone else, only to find your own seat empty when you needed someone to show up for you. It is in those quiet, aching moments that you come face with the truth you once feared. No one is your friend. Not in the way you imagined, not in the way that fairy tales and childhood dreams painted friendship to be. This isn't a lesson about hate or blame. It's not a reason to harden your heart. It's a revelation. One that teaches you that your survival, your strength, your growth must not depend on the applause or approval of others. You learn to stop chasing people who are already running away. You stop searching for comfort in people who are never meant to stay. And instead, you begin the most important relationship of your life, the one with yourself. When no one is there to lift you, you find the strength to rise. When no one listens, you learn to hear your own voice. When no one claps, you remind yourself that your worth was never tied to their recognition. That's when the transformation begins. That's when you begin to walk, not because someone holds your hand, but because your spirit refuses to stay down. You learn that the world may fail you, people may forget you, but your courage, your will, your fire, those are yours forever. And slowly, what once felt like loneliness starts to feel like liberation. You begin to understand that solitude is not emptiness. It is space. It is freedom. It is clarity. You no longer beg for someone to understand you. You begin to understand yourself. You no longer wait for someone to come save you. You become your own rescue. This is where you stop being a follower of people who don't see your worth and start becoming the leader of your own story. Some might say this realization makes you bitter, but you know better. You are not bitter. You are awake. You are aware. You are learning the hardest lesson life has to offer, that self. Love is not just a pretty phrase, it is survival. It is the foundation of everything. You are learning to be your own friend, your own guide, your own biggest supporter. Because once you find that strength within, no betrayal can destroy you, no abandonment can break you, and no silence can silence you. You start walking with a quiet confidence, knowing that even if no one walks beside you, you will keep moving forward, not with bitterness in your heart, but with peace in your soul. Because the most powerful thing you will ever do is rise when no one is watching, and shine when no one believes in you. There comes a point in everyone's life when the people you once called your whole world start feeling like strangers. And it doesn't happen overnight. It happens in moments. Quiet, almost invisible moments. The day you were crying in silence, but chose not to call anyone because you already knew they wouldn't understand. The moment you needed a shoulder to lean on, but all you found was distance wrapped in polite excuses. The time you told someone your truth, only to watch them weaponize your vulnerability later. These are not just painful experiences. They are powerful wake-up calls that begin to shift your entire perspective on relationships and the meaning of true friendship. You start noticing how many of your so-called friendships are built on convenience, not connection. They check on you when they need something. They listen only when it suits their timing. And they praise you only when your success doesn't threaten their comfort. You start feeling like you are always giving, always trying, always present. But in return, there's an emptiness that echoes louder with every conversation. The people you once thought would stand with you in fire begin to disappear the moment the smoke rises. And at first, you blame yourself. You think maybe you were too sensitive, too much, too emotional. But with time, you realize that recognizing your worth doesn't make you too much. It makes you enough. This understanding is painful, but it is also liberating, because for the first time you stop waiting to be saved. You stop expecting others to fix what they didn't break. You stop explaining your pain to people who are only interested in your performance, not your truth. You begin to see the difference between those who clap because they care, and those who clap because it makes them feel superior. You start to differentiate between energy that heals and energy that harms. And once you make that distinction, your standards rise, not out of arrogance, but out of self-respect. The moment you accept that no one is truly your friend in the way you once believed, you begin to reclaim the parts of yourself you kept hiding to keep others comfortable. You remember your dreams, the ones you pushed aside to support others. You revisit your boundaries, the ones you kept bending to maintain relationships. You return to your essence, the person you were before life taught you to shrink. Because when no one else stands up for you, you have no choice but to stand up for yourself. And in that moment, you become your own safe space. You realize that peace doesn't come from others agreeing with your decisions. It comes from finally agreeing with yourself. You understand that people can walk out of your life, but they can't walk away with your worth. Your identity is no longer tied to who validates you or who stays. It is grounded in the unshakable truth that you are enough, even when no one says it out loud. You start walking away from circles where you feel like an option and walk towards spaces where you can be whole, even if you have to create those spaces alone. You also begin to heal, not because someone held your hand through the pain, but because you learned how to hold your own heart. You grieve, you release, and then you rise, not in spite of the absence of friends, but because of it. That absence teaches you everything. It teaches you resilience. It teaches you boundaries. It teaches you to pour your energy into people who nourish you instead of drain you. Most of all, it teaches you that your value doesn't decrease when others fail to see it. In fact, sometimes the greatest gift people give you is their absence. It makes space for your presence to finally come alive. And while the world may see solitude as something to fear, you begin to see it as something sacred. It becomes the ground where your soul grows roots. It becomes the place where you stop pretending, where you stop performing, and where you finally begin to live. You no longer mold yourself to be accepted. You no longer soften your truth to be liked. You start honoring your emotions, your needs, and your vision for life, not because someone is encouraging you to, but because you've learned to trust the voice within. And that voice, no matter how many people walk away, stays with you. That voice becomes your anchor. That voice becomes your best friend sometimes. The most painful realization isn't that someone left you. It's that they were never truly with you. They were there for the laughter, for the winds, for the light you carried. But the moment that light dimmed, the moment you needed just a little warmth in return, they vanished, and it breaks something in you. Not because you depended on them blindly, but because you trusted them with a part of your soul, and they didn't even notice when that part shattered. You sit with that silence, that absence, and at first you feel numb. But slowly, quietly, that pain begins to speak, not in anger, but in truth. It tells you that you had given people a place in your life they never earned, that you were holding on to people who had already let go of you emotionally long before they physically disappeared. You begin to reflect on how much of your time, your energy, your love was invested in people who only saw you as temporary. How often you showed up even when your own world was falling apart. How you smiled through your own storms to be a sunshine for someone else. And the question that begins to rise is not why did they leave, but why did I keep giving to people who never gave back? That's when the healing begins, not when they come back to apologize, but when you stop expecting them to. When you realize that your peace doesn't depend on the closure you never received. When you understand that some people don't break you to teach you a lesson. They break you because they were never capable of loving you the way you loved them. And then you begin to notice a change in yourself. You start sitting with your pain instead of running from it. You stop chasing people who never looked back. You no longer feel the need to explain your worth to those who couldn't see it the first time. There is a stillness that comes with solitude, and within that stillness you rediscover the strength you forgot you had. You realize that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply let go. Let go of the people who made you feel like you had to earn their love, who made you feel like being you was not enough. Let go not with hatred but with grace, because holding on only keeps you anchored in the past, while letting go sets your soul free to move forward. You begin to set boundaries, not as walls to push people away, but as gates that guard your peace. You start recognizing the difference between genuine connection and emotional convenience. You no longer fall for words. You watch actions. You no longer get excited by attention. You value consistency. Because you've been there. You've experienced the kind of loneliness that teaches you everything. You've sat in silence so loud it echoed through your bones. You've faced nights so dark they almost made you forget there was ever light. But through all of it you didn't break. You bent, you cried, you fell. But you rose, and in rising, you learned that the people who were meant for you would never have made you question your worth. Now, when you walk into a room, you don't look for who's cheering for you. You look within. You carry your own cheerleader, your own support, your own unwavering belief in who you are. You learn to live not for the approval of others, but in alignment with your truth. You stop apologizing for your standards, for your silence, for your distance. Because you've realized that not everyone deserves access to your world. Not everyone has the heart to hold what you carry. You no longer seek friendships that only take, you build connections that nourish, that grow, that reflect the love you've worked so hard to give to yourself. This journey of realizing that no one is your friend in the way you once believed is not a path to isolation, but a path to self-awareness. It sharpens your intuition. It protects your spirit. It turns your scars into wisdom. You learn to celebrate your solitude because it no longer feels empty. It feels intentional. And from that place of self, knowing, you begin to attract not crowds, but kindred souls, not noise, but truth, not popularity, but peace. And while the world may continue to misunderstand the way you protect your space, you no longer feel the need to defend it, because you know what it cost you to reach this place, the heartbreak, the betrayal, the loneliness, and you refuse to trade your peace for the illusion of belonging there is a strange kind of freedom that comes when you finally stop expecting others to understand you. When you stop handing out pieces of your soul hoping someone will handle them with care. When you accept that not everyone who smiles at you is a friend, and not everyone who stands next to you is standing with you. That truth is not easy to digest. It feels cold, it feels unfair, it even feels cruel at times. But somewhere deep within that realization, you begin to feel something powerful waking up inside you. The pain that once crushed you now starts to shape you. The silence that once scared you becomes your teacher. You begin to grow, not in spite of being alone, but because of it. You reflect on the times when you were surrounded by people, yet felt invisible. The times you gave and gave and gave, thinking your loyalty would be reciprocated, only to be met with indifference. You think of how many birthdays, celebrations, and achievements you showed up for, and how many of your moments passed by unnoticed. The imbalance begins to show itself not just in your relationships, but in your spirit. You begin to feel emotionally exhausted, spiritually drained, mentally heavy, and then you ask yourself, is this what friendship is supposed to feel like? That's when the internal shift begins. You stop placing your worth in the hands of others. You stop needing constant validation. You begin to realize that people can love the way you laugh, but not stay to hear the silence when you cry. They can love the way you shine, but not hold space for you when you're dim. You learn the hardest lesson. Not every connection is meant to last, and not every person you care about will care the same way in return. And that doesn't make you unlovable. It just makes you aware. Aware of how easily people can take without giving. Aware of how dangerous it is to hand over your peace to people who don't even know how to hold their own. You begin to retreat, not in bitterness, but in wisdom. You start conserving your energy. You become intentional with your time, your words, your presence. You choose silence over small talk, depth over drama, truth over temporary companionship. You no longer feel the need to be everywhere, please everyone, or explain yourself. You start prioritizing your mental and emotional well-being, not because you're selfish, but because you've finally understood what it means to protect your peace. People may begin to notice the change in you. They may call you distant, cold, or too guarded, but what they fail to see is the journey that brought you here. They don't see the nights you cried yourself to sleep wondering why no one stayed. They don't hear the inner battles you fought while smiling for the world. They don't feel the emptiness of being there for everyone and having no one when you needed someone the most. So no, you are not cold. You are careful. You are not bitter. You are healing. You are not guarded. You are growing. And as you continue to walk this path, something beautiful begins to happen. You start falling in love with your own company. You find joy in simple things. Sunsets, music, silence. You start rebuilding yourself, not for anyone else to admire, but for yourself to feel whole. You create your own peace, your own joy, your own strength, and in doing so, you become unshakable. Because now, your stability doesn't come from how many people surround you, but from how deeply rooted you are in who you are. You stop begging for space in people's lives. You stop trying to prove your worth to those who never saw it. You stop shrinking to fit into places you were never meant to be in, and instead, you stand tall in your truth. You speak with clarity, you walk with purpose, you live with self-respect. The people who once overlooked you no longer matter. Their absence no longer haunts you. Their silence no longer hurts you, because you've grown past the version of yourself that needed them. This isn't loneliness, it's transformation. This isn't isolation, it's self-reclamation. You've walked through fire, and instead of letting it consume you, you let it mold you. And now you rise not because someone lifted you, but because you decided you deserve to rise. You carry your own light now. You build your own table. You lead your own way. So if life has taught you that no one is truly your friend, let that not make your heart heavy. Let it make your soul stronger. Because in that pain, in that isolation, in that deep silence, you found something no one else could give you. You found your own voice. You became your own healer. You learned how to rise, not by leaning on others, but by standing on the strength within you. You are not broken because people left. You are not unworthy because they chose not to stay. You are not weak because you felt alone. In fact, you are powerful beyond measure, because despite all of that, you continued. You moved forward. You picked yourself up when no one else did. You chose to believe in your own light when no one else saw it. This speech is not to make you fear people. It's to remind you that your first and forever friend must always be yourself. Because once you become whole on your own, you no longer need others to complete you. You allow them to walk beside you, and that is the truest form of freedom. That is where your story begins, not with who left, but with who you chose to become. So walk forward with courage, speak with strength, love yourself loudly, and remember, even if no one claps, no one calls, no one stands beside you, you will still rise, because you always have and you always will.